if that's realized, that dwarfs the commitments made by countries like China or Japan or even the United States. He also talked about issues regarding terrorism. A large chunk of his speech was dedicated to terrorism. He said there's no distinction between the good Taliban and bad Taliban. He said the world is now coming around to India's view that terrorism is not just a policing problem. He gave an elaborate sort of detailing about what he's done vis-a-vis SAARC, what he's done vis-a-vis the neighborhood. He's talked about all his visits to neighboring countries. He's named each and every neighboring country by name, except, of course, the elephant in the room, which is Pakistan, and we'll talk about that in greater detail. He also gave out great details about the efforts that are being put in by this government to try and help NRIs. Remember, the UAE has the largest number of Indian expats, 2.5 million plus of them. 70,000 of them were lucky to listen to that speech today, both inside and outside that cricket stadium. Let's try and dissect what's been a show like nobody else can put up, at least in the Indian political spectrum, like the Prime Minister does. Here in our studios, Anshul Vora, our Foreign Affairs Editor. We're also still in conversation with Dr. W.P.S. Sidhu from Brookings, India, and Dr. Wael Awad is the South Asia Bureau Chief of Sana News Agency, the largest Syrian news agency. Dr. Awad, let me start with you. From whatever you've heard in the Prime Minister's speech, your first impressions. I mean, it was an hour-long speech. The very fact that an Indian Prime Minister is in the Emirates and gets this kind of public reception, I mean, just walk us through what that means in the context of the world that the part of the world that he addressed the Indian community in.
I think no doubt about it that he is a statesman, and who followed the Prime Minister's speeches throughout India, more than 600 speeches during his election campaign, will realize that he is the man of the mass, and he really can know how to sell himself to the mass. I tweeted some time ago that he beat Rajnikant, Amitabh Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan politically when he were able to catch the heart of millions of Indians in the Gulf state, because we have 8 million Indian currently permanently staying there. We have 14 million Indian in total who goes annually there, and I think you could see from the crowd that all of them, irrespective of their religion or color, they were all clapping, chanting, and they were quite happy to see that the Prime Minister of India has already reached to them, and they're able to give them the confidence that India did not neglect them, and he appreciated actually what they have been contributing to India. And I have been following the tweets of the Prime Minister's office and also from the Ministry of External Affairs, which helped me in learning the English part of his speech. But I think he has really done a great job, and nobody can expect that he has done this visit in isolation of only for the Emirates, but he has done it for India as well, domestically, because he has catch the heart of the South Indian at least, and also the coming up elections in different states of India, Bihar and otherwise, other country, other places. But I think that he is a man of the mass, and he knows how to capture the heart of many Indians.
Oh yeah, I mean, he works a crowd like nobody else does, and I can say that from personal experience. I mean, there were 5,000 Indians in the address that he had in China, in Shanghai. There are 70,000 there in Dubai, so I can imagine. I mean, it's like a bit like a rock concert, but I want to get into the contents of what he said. And Dr. Sidhu, a large chunk of his speech was about terrorism. I mean, think about this: an Indian Prime Minister in the Emirates saying there's no difference between the good Taliban and bad Taliban, saying that there are countries which practice terrorism as part of state policy. I mean, for me, I mean, as an outsider, that was unthinkable stuff till a few years ago.
Well, absolutely, but also let's not forget that within, within the Arab world, within West Asia, within the Gulf, within the GCC, there are countries which are quite uncomfortable with the distinction that, say, some of the other countries are making, like Qatar, for example, which have, negotiations and supporting the conversations with the Taliban. So I think there is a nuance, and he's certainly playing into some of that concern as well, because, UAE has been extremely cautious and, as you rightly pointed out earlier, successful about countering the ISIS threat. So I think there's a recognition, and he knew he would get a very, sympathetic ear to that perspective and perception as well.
Anshul, I mean, again, a substantial chunk of his speech talked about SAARC and what India is intending to do with SAARC. I mean, he named every SAARC country by name except the elephant in the room, which is Pakistan.
He didn't name Pakistan, but he certainly attacked Pakistan when he spoke about terror cooperation, and essentially UAE is talking in India's language, whose focus on having the Convention on Terrorism, something that India has been pushing for at the UN. He did not, but he again spoke about BBIN, which essentially is like, if you're not going to agree Pakistan with a motor vehicle agreement, which is connecting all SAARC countries, we're going ahead with BBIN anyway. So there was a lot of messaging. He did say UAE is now towing India's line or agreeing with India more on terror, samajhne wale to samajh hi jayenge. Direct hit in that sense. So Prime Minister, several places that he goes to, he does try to make these points, but essentially the larger point that he's making is India's focus on there is no good terrorist or bad terrorist. This is something that India has been focusing on for quite some time.
Okay, I'm going to take a break. When I come back, we'll talk about some of the other points that the Prime Minister touched upon. He talked about some of the facilities that are being extended to non-resident Indians. He talked in great detail about some of the deals that have been struck, the LBA with Bangladesh, the Naga Peace Accord. Quick break, back in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. We're covering Marhaba Namo, that 1 hour long speech by the Prime Minister. The first time that, not just any Indian Prime Minister by the way, any visiting head of government has got this kind of a reception in the United Arab Emirates, I'm told. We're still in conversation with Dr. Wael Awad, Dr. W.P.S. Sidhu and Anshul Vora, Foreign Affairs Editor here in our studios. Dr. Awad, again, I keep going back to this whole terrorism bit because, again, a large chunk of his speech was about terrorism. I mean, him saying it in the Emirates when the UAE has, along with Saudi Arabia and Qatar, in both active and not so active, covert and overt ways, backed the fight against Assad, for example. I mean, the intricacies of the terrorism problem in the Gulf, vis-a-vis Iran, vis-a-vis Hezbollah. I mean, the Prime Minister, by just saying good Taliban, bad Taliban, the whole world is coming around to India's view on terrorism, is he glossing over these intricacies, these sort of finer details which matter a lot in that part of the world, or is the Emirates also now coming around to what is a globally accepted view of terrorism?
Absolutely, you are right, said it, because see, the problem here is that the Arab countries, especially the Gulf country, where you named it rightly, they have supported IS, they have supported Al-Nusra, which is Al-Qaeda, they have started the culture of jihadism also from the Afghanistan time till this time. So now they have realized that who cooked the poison will test it. They realize that these people are coming back and they are attacking, so it is backfire on them. So therefore, those elements within those countries who have been supporting terrorism and terrorist groups have realized that this is now become a global effort to fight terrorism together. And that's why you can see under the table there are lots of talk in the back channels in Syria, among with the Saudi Arabia, the Turkey on one side, the Emirates on the other side. Qatar is trying to approach Syria and Egypt on the same front. But I think they will be themselves now feeling that they need the help of the other country. In money, is not only everything that they have on their pocket that they should take. And I think the Prime Minister rightly said it, and he already mentioned it in the joint statement. And if you notice, he referred a lot to the joint statement, which is very strong, very balanced, especially when he mentioned that religion should not be used and as a pretext to attack another country. And if the Arab really follow half of what is exactly being said, we wouldn't have any problem in the Arab world.
That's right. Let me get Dr. Sidhu in about the economic engagement, because this was as much about the economic engagement as about dealing with terrorism or any of the political issues. 4.5 lakh crores. I mean, that figure is just mind-boggling.
Well, again, absolutely. By itself, it's really quite critical. But I think, again, we need to see when and how and what tranches it's going to come through in, and what is the capacity of India to actually absorb that. But Zakir, with your permission, if I might make a couple of points about the speech, which I thought were very interesting. You know, first of all, at 60 minutes, at an hour, it's probably one of his shorter speeches. You know, we just heard him speak for about 95 minutes at the Independence Day, you know, in his Independence Day speech. But second, and this is equally interesting, there was a missing component on foreign policy in the Independence Day speech, and we heard it today. And that's an interesting sort of dimension and element that you know, sort of see going forward. But at the same time, let me also kind of point out two contradictions, and one of them relates partly to the economic aspect that you focused on. You know, one of them is, and you already asked a while about this, and it's an important point, that there is a little bit of a contradiction between, on the one hand, celebrating rightly the breakthrough framework agreement with the Nagas through negotiations, but on the other hand, also sort of saying, look, no negotiations with terrorists. Now, you could make a distinction between cross-border terrorists and others, militants within the country, but he didn't quite do that.
Okay.
Second, he's also talking to an audience, who are largely Indian citizens, not in India, probably because the economic opportunities are better in UAE.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and
I think that would be the case for a large chunk of... Yeah, I guess that would be the case for a large chunk of the 2.5 million expats in the UAE. But very quickly, I mean, what's the biggest takeaway for you from this tour?
I think the biggest takeaway for me would be, again, terror. That's something we've been focusing on, and investment, something that you just had a conversation with Dr. Sidhu. But also, I agree with Dr. Sidhu. A couple of points, very quick points, Zaka, that I like to make. He was somehow addressing the poor of India still, the poor of India in the UAE and the poor of India here, while he's missing in the parliament. At stage in a foreign country, certainly at home, the political parties will question him on. But when he said, America mein kuch karu ya na karu, lekin aapke liye maine ye kiya hai, the Indian Community Fund that he spoke about, I know for a fact, has existed in several countries for sure. I don't know how many, whether they've added countries or not. I think he was addressing the domestic audience to a great deal, but the bigger takeaway would be cooperation on terror and investment.
All right, we'll wait and see. We'll know in a week's time, by the way. The NSA of Pakistan will be here for those NSA-level talks. He had quite a few swipes at Pakistan. I mean, named every single SAARC country except Pakistan, but lots of swipes at Pakistan. We'll see how all of this plays out, because diplomacy is a great game. It's fun covering it. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Wael Awad, Dr. W.P.S. Sidhu, and Anshul Vora, for joining us in this special coverage of Marhaba Namo. If you'd been at home and tuned in to CNN IBN, thanks for your time. Good night.